So I thought I'd talk a bit about North Korea tonight. And the guy to go to with that is Bruce Klingner, who is with the Heritage Foundation, a senior research fellow for Northeastern Asia and former CIA Korea deputy chief. Bruce, welcome back to the program.
Well, thanks for having me back.
So what did North Korea intend to do when it either blew up or burned down that building that was supposed to be the place where the North and South could get together for a conversation now and then?
Well, in a very deliberative, sort of symbolic way, they're trying to raise tensions, but in an incremental manner. So it was a liaison office between the Koreas, sort of a de facto embassy, but it had been dormant since January when they closed it because of COVID. And even before that, for about a year, North Korea has rejected all dialogue with both South Korea and the U.S. So it was a sort of a low-key way of showing that they want to try to induce more benefits and a relaxation of sanctions from South Korea, and then also indirectly from the U.S.
But how does that exactly benefit Korea? Because, I mean, I would imagine if they really wanted to get the sanctions off, they'd say to President Trump, fine, we've got 35 nuclear weapons. We're going to get rid of our entire program, stop making nukes. We've still got missiles. We've still got some nukes that we've got stored away. We'll compromise that much. Tell us what you're willing to give us. But instead, they take what seems like a provocative move of saying that building where we were going to talk, yeah, it's toast. It's gone. How does that benefit the North? Or is this just more of the craziness we get from the guy running the place?
Well, North Korea has really kind of a two-page playbook. It's provocations and then a charm offensive. But with North Korea, the charm offensive tends to be more offensive than charming. And it tends to be sort of a, I want you to be my friend or I'll kill you style of reaching out. So
I've had friends like that before.
Yeah. And it's particularly puzzling that they're doing this to the South Korean president, Moon Jae-in, and also some really kind of vicious, insults to him because he's a progressive or a liberal who's trying to improve relations, and he's been offering a lot of economic and diplomatic benefits and concessions, though he's constrained in what he can actually provide by the international and sanctions and the U.S. laws. So, what North Korea is really doing is treating him like a dog as a way of trying to get him to work harder to provide benefits or pressure the U.S. and the UN to reduce the sanctions that are really hurting the North Korean economy.
I'm talking to Bruce Klingner from the Heritage Foundation. But Bruce, I mean, I would assume that every politician, even the craziest ones, learn things when they're on the job. Now, he's been on the job for a while. He is having taken over from his dad. When you look at your playbook and you say, is this actually producing some results for us? Do they have any reason to believe that this kind of thing produces results? Because in most of the rest of the world, when you do those kind of things, especially to people that ought to be your allies, the progressive liberal guy, who I think, didn't he sort of dark horse up the middle when the two other conservative candidates in the country were running for president? And he ends up winning as the dark horse candidate going up the middle. And because most of Korean politics, I think you've told me this before, most of the politicians by American standards are pretty conservative, and this guy was a bit of an outlier or an anomaly.
Well, he came into power because the previous Korean president, a conservative, was impeached. So at the time, there was such a backlash, not only against Park Geun-hye, the president, but also really against all conservatives. So there were these pretty massive demonstrations. And it was clear that a progressive or a liberal was going to win, that the conservatives had really been, disenfranchised and they couldn't get their act together and really were keeping their heads down. So it was pretty obvious he was going to be elected. And he came in, about 6 months or so before the scheduled election because of the impeachment.
But if Kim manages to make the new president, the progressive liberal, who might arguably be his best chance at getting some things that he wants, if he makes him look badly enough, the country will swing back to the right, won't it?
Right. But what North Korea has found over the years is that they're often rewarded for when they misbehave. They'll create a tension, and then they often get benefits for diffusing the crisis that they created. It's sort of, if you have a big tantrum, mom and dad might give you a cookie to calm down, and then you're happy because you got it worked. And it's happened, many times in the past. So, they create a crisis and then they hope to get bought back to the status quo.
All right. So where does this go, and what should the United States do about this? And does it put us in greater peril of of North Korea saying, "Okay, we haven't been provocative enough. Let's launch some more missiles. Let's test some more nukes," because it seems like if that's the playbook, that's where they'll go.
Right. They're already vowing to do other things sort of specifically and then a bit more vaguely. But, right now we're still if this were a barroom fight, we're still at the hold me back stage rather than the hold my beer and watch me do something stupid stage. But they've already vowed that they're going to return military units to the DMZ. They had been removed as part of an inter-Korean military agreement 2 years ago, which the South Koreans claimed was a great, sign of progress. They've talked about some military activity in the West Sea, where there's a disputed border between the Koreas, which has been the site of deadly clashes between the two navies. They're even maybe sending signals that they could go after defectors in the South. They're saying that they've committed hostile acts against the supreme leadership, et cetera. So there are a number of both specific and then kind of vague things. And they've also had messages to President Trump, sort of along the lines of like a Chicago gangster of, nice reelection campaign you have there, not shame if something were to break, sort of hinting that if you want a quiet election season, you better give us what we want. So there's signals to both Seoul and to Washington. So Korea has been pretty quiet the last year or two, but I think it's going to be a lot more interesting this year.
Well, it's kind of interesting, and you're the guy on Asia. So let me ask you this: the Chinese now have had this dust up, a smaller dust up, but they appear to be slightly sword rattling with India because they see an advantage while the rest of the world is more than a little bit distracted by the China virus. You'd think perhaps that maybe that's why Kim is doing this as well, saying the United States is consumed with its own problems. Parts of American cities taken over by armed militant leftists, which is so weird. I can't even believe I'm saying it. And the China virus continuing to be a big problem for this country. He'd say, well, this is our chance to get something, but not by being provocative, because the minute you start causing problems, then the United States has to say, well, okay, we got to take our eye off the domestic problems in big American cities and the China virus to deal with you again. And I just wonder whether the United States, the president and his Secretary of State, will have the patience to deal with that.
Right. Well, North Korea doesn't like to be ignored. It doesn't feel like it has leverage when it's being ignored. So that's when it starts, rattling the cage. And again, it has been rewarded many times in the past when it's created crises, either to gain benefits or to divert attention from other actions it's taken, or even internally it may do a rally round the flag effect to divert the populace's attention from how dire their economic and food situation is. So it's a way of kind of slowly going up the escalation ladder, and so slowly that it's sort of they're doing it while looking over their shoulder like, well, don't you want to buy me back to the ground here? So it's sort of a well-worn path, but it's also a dangerous path.
No doubt. Bruce, thanks so much. We always appreciate your insights on the program, and thanks for the work you do at Heritage. Well,
thank you very much for having me. I look forward to being back.
You will be. That's Bruce Klingner, who's a senior research fellow for Northeastern Asia and former CIA Korea deputy chief.